Good evening, you're watching News Mongolian World. I'm your host, Taner Batter. And for our top stories, Prime Minister Oyun-Erdene stepped out to meet demonstrators. Speaker of Parliament Zandanshatar says that 1 trillion MNT loans programs will be implemented. Regional hospitals need to improve their capacity, and for the news, stay tuned. Around 2 p.m. local time, the Prime Minister of Mongolia, accompanied by government officials and protected by SWAT bodyguards, came out to meet the protesters. On Wednesday, thousands of protesters in Ulaanbaatar city continued demonstrating for the 4th consecutive day at Sukhota Square. Protesters, frustrated with the country's economic crisis and poverty, accused government officials and legislators of corruption, theft of coal and smuggling of budget funds. As soon as the Prime Minister started his speech, demonstrators started booing him, chanting their demand and throwing objects to the stage. Despite crowd yelling and people ignoring his speech, he continued his speech for more than 30 minutes. After some protesters were allowed on stage to express their demand, the Prime Minister headed back to Government Palace. As an outcome, the protesters and Prime Minister seemed to agree to organize a working group on checking coal smuggling-related cases, including representation from people and demonstrators, in order to be fair and reflect their demands. The Speaker of Parliament held a press briefing on Wednesday to provide the latest updates and emerging issues. According to the Speaker of Parliament and the Government of Mongolia have jointly started work on legal reform to be implemented in 2023 within a part of the new revival policy. In this context, a package of draft bills for economic reform, social policy reform and political reform of governance has been developed. For example, economic reform will include 3 basic law parts directed in stabilizing the economy and attracting investment, diversifying the economy and revitalizing industrialization. Due to the inaccurate policies over the past 30 years, Mongolia has become an economy that imports a lot and not an economy that generates a lot of savings and therefore has been suffering from a debt burden. We should correct and resolve this mistake of not supporting national local industries. Currently, household incomes are falling and the population is at risk of falling into poverty, and the exchange rate of MNT has weakened by 19% in 2022. Later, the Speaker talked about measures to be taken to restrict price increases. We will adopt policies to restrict price increases to stabilize the foreign exchange rate and to increase Mongolian exports. In order to support the livelihood of the population, the exchange rate needs to be stabilized. Measures will be taken to increase the reserves and the flow of foreign currencies in order to stabilize the foreign exchange rate. Notably, a 1 trillion MNT loan program will be implemented in order to increase foreign currency flow by up to $1 billion USD. A loan interest subsidy policy will be implemented and will attach great importance to Mongolian exports. Later in the day, cabinet members provided updates on the latest emerging issues. Now let's take a look at other current affairs. There are long lines of people at the hospitals in Ulaanbaatar city as regional hospitals send patients with complications to the capital for complex diagnostics and medical procedures. Doctors and patients say this creates a burden for Ulaanbaatar's hospitals.
Tsendma came from Dontkov province because of a suspicious abscess. She underwent surgery at Central Hospital No. 1. She says she spent 20 days in Ulaanbaatar to wait for a final diagnosis and undergo surgery. During her stay, she and her husband spent around 5 million Mongolian tugreks on medical treatment, temporary accommodations and medication. I came here because I had no other options. Medical services in the provinces need some improvement. Local hospitals barely provide some first-level treatment. For more complex treatment, we have to go to central hospitals.
I see people living in Ulaanbaatar get their appointment times through online systems. Patients coming from the provinces have their own challenges, starting with temporary accommodations and so on. I think regional healthcare services should be improved.
As we were putting together this report, a long line of patients, mainly from the provinces, were seen at the hospital's front desk, waiting for their appointments, showing the need for more complex diagnostics and treatments at local province hospitals. Some province hospitals have improved their technical and human resources capacity and now provide more advanced medical treatment. Orkhon Province's Central Hospital has already conducted its 210th angioplasty.
We had to keep our patients in the intensive care unit and transport them to Ulaanbaatar to Central Hospital number 3. Of course, some complications can occur when transporting a patient. Now conducting complex treatments locally, we prevent risk and save time. I underwent complex medical treatment locally 2 times. In April, I had a heart attack and had a surgery. I just had an angiogram.
Providing full diagnostic services locally and conducting complex surgery not only saves time and money, but also reduces the risks of complications and the workload for hospitals in Ulaanbaatar.
We set a goal to improve local hospitals' capacity for conducting general surgeries and some complex and common surgeries, like neurosurgery and angioplasty. As you know, heart attacks are quite common. By doing so, we are implementing sustainable development goals, such as increasing people's average life expectancy.
The Ministry of Health has been providing the urology departments of local hospitals in 15 provinces with kidney biopsy equipment since April of this year, allowing them to conduct 4 types of diagnostic services and 8 types of kidney and urology surgeries locally. Experts say such measures are expected to reduce the workload for central hospitals in Ulaanbaatar.
Thank you for staying with us. Now let's take a look at the currency exchange rates provided by Mongol Bank. Here's the international news from our partner agencies. Amid warnings that biodiversity isn't free for environmental leaders will gather in Montreal to hammer out measures aimed at shoring up the world's land and marine ecosystems and coming up with tens of billions of dollars to fund these conservation efforts.
Delegates from about 190 countries will assemble for nearly 2 weeks starting Wednesday at the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, or COP15, to finalize a framework for protecting 30% of global land and marine areas by 2030. Currently, 17% of terrestrial and 10% of marine areas are protected. The proposed framework also calls for reducing the rate of invasive species introduction and establishment by 50%, cutting pesticide use and health, and eliminating the discharge of plastic waste.
Canada is welcoming you here because we expect action. We're challenging ourselves and we're challenging you. Now, there are lots of disagreements between governments, but if we can't agree as a world on something as fundamental as protecting nature, well, nothing else matters. Until we agree that we should stop species from going extinct, until we agree that our water should be clean and our air should be clean, until we agree that it matters that forests, grasslands, jungles endure, we cannot guarantee a future for our kids.
Our land, water, and air are poisoned by chemicals and pesticides and choked with plastics. Our addiction to fossil fuels has thrown our climate into chaos, from heat waves and forest fires to communities parched by heat and drought, or inundated and destroyed by terrifying floods. Unsustainable production and consumption are sending emissions skyrocketing and degrading our land, sea, and air. Today, 1/3 of all land is degraded, making it harder to feed growing populations.
The goals, more ambitious than earlier ones that have mostly gone unmet, are expected to be at the heart of the meeting debate, but not far behind will be the issue of the finance, with developing countries likely to push for significant monetary commitments before signing into any deal. The draft framework calls for raising $200 billion or 1% of the world's GDP for conservation by 2030. Another $500 billion annually would come from doing away with the politically sensitive issue of subsidies that make food and fuel cheaper in many places. The United Nations conference comes less than a month after countries gathered to tackle climate change, agreeing for the first time to pay poor countries for the damage being caused by warming planet. Climate change coupled with habitat loss, pollution, and development have hammered the world's biodiversity, with one estimate in 2019 warning that 1 million plant and animal species face extinction within decades, a rate of loss 1,000 times greater than expected. Humans use about 50,000 wild species routinely, and 1 out of 5 people of the world's 7.9 billion population depend on those species for food and income, the report said.
European Union leaders and their Western Balkan counterparts gathered Tuesday for talks aimed at boosting their partnership as Russia's war in Ukraine threatens to reshape the geopolitical balance in the region.
The European Union wants to use the one-day summit in Albania's capital to tell leaders from Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia that they have futures within the wealthy economic bloc and give them concrete signs rather than just promises that they will join one day. European Council President Charles Michel, who is jointly chairing the summit, hailed it as a symbolic meeting that will cement the futures of the 6 countries within Europe. He highlighted European Union's energy support to the region as the war in Ukraine hits supplies and prices, as well as a mobile telephone roaming charges agreement as proof of the bloc's commitment. According to a draft of the declaration to be adopted at the summit, the EU will repeat its full and unequivocal commitment to the European Union membership perspective of the Western Balkans and call for an acceleration of accession talks with the incumbents. In return, the EU expects full solidarity from its Western Balkans partners and wants them fully aligned with its foreign policies. Although the progress of the 6 nations toward EU membership had stalled recently, there has been some progress over the past few months. Leaders will also discuss migration issues, as one of Europe's biggest concerns remains the number of migrants trying to enter the bloc without authorization via the Western Balkans, notably through Serbia.
Ukraine's Air Force declined to comment on the exact extent of damage from alleged drone attacks Monday onto a strategic airbase in Russia, but said that they will have reduced the capabilities of the Russian army. We have seen these consequences of the strikes on Russian airbase in open sources. We saw satellite images and photos that the Russians themselves displayed on their resources. What are the consequences? They will have less aviation equipment after being damaged due to these mysterious explosions. It is about whether they will be restored because they repair. They need to have something to do with and how. They can take down or parts from other aircraft, but it is undoubtedly excellent news, because if 1 or 2 aircraft fail, then in the future some of more aircraft may fail in some way. This reduces their capabilities, and it is clear that the making of such massive missile strikes is still probable, because they still have enough of such aircraft in service as Tu-95, Tu-160 and Tu-22 and 3. Unfortunately, they still exist in Russia, but the security measures they do not follow that can lead to further consequences and decrease their combat potential.
Ignat said that Ukraine is actively using the Western-supplied IRIS-T and NESA-MS systems, which have shot down all targets they were used for. He also said that Russia has not been using Iranian-made drones in recent weeks, saying that it is possible that the first batch ordered by Russia has run out. He added that he was not aware of any reports of Iran committing to further supplies.
Now let's take a look at our regular feature on sports. The FIFA Fan Festival in Doha was alive with Moroccan supporters enjoying their victory over Spain on Tuesday. They celebrated the win over Spain to the tunes of the Kuwaiti-established Miami band. The band that is considered one of the most famous in the Gulf performed to 30,000 fans in Al-Bida Park following the match between Spain and Morocco. Morocco became only the fourth African country to reach the quarterfinals at the biggest soccer tournament in the world by beating Spain 3-0 in a penalty shootout after a 0-0 draw through extra time. FIFA Fan Festival in Doha welcomed its millionth visitor last Friday, according to its director Med Al-Madi.
I'm happily saying that we got to welcome our millionth visitor on Friday with an average of 75,000 visitors every day. So the response was positive. People are happy when they're here, and that's what matters for us.
I'm very happy today with this win. You can't imagine our joy. This World Cup is an Arab country and we are hoping it is won by an Arab country. We hope it is a win and we won't accept anything less than the trophy. She led this project for years ahead of the tournament and planned several events for fans from around the world. The 1 million fan received the VIP tickets to the World Cup finale. The fan zone at Al-Bida Park plans major concerts as well as during the tournament. The International Olympic Committee has delayed its plan to award the 2030 edition of the Winter Olympics and Paralympics. It revealed after the second day of its executive board meeting. It had been hoped that a host could be a rubber stamped at next year's delayed session in Mumbai, but the IOC Executive Board has decided to provide more time to the future host commission, while Olympic Games Executive Director Christopher Dabi claimed it would enable it to consult deeply with interested parties. International federations, national Olympic committees, athletes, winter sports industry experts, and the International Paralympic Committee would also be consulted by the future host commission.
We are not targeting an election in 2023 at the 140th session. Okay, so that is clear. Now, when the targeted dialogue is opened, is then a recommendation from the Commission to the Executive Board. We are not there yet.
Sapporo and Salt Lake City had been considered the frontrunners for the 2030 event after the government of British Columbia did not back Vancouver's proposal, although W referenced 3 interested parties in staging the event. While this would mean that the games would be awarded fewer than 7 years in advance, W affirmed that the experience of the 3 candidates in continuous dialogue would ensure that this was not an issue. Sapporo has long been viewed as the favorite for the 2030 Winter Olympics, although doubt has been cast following the corruption scandal associated with Tokyo 2020. Salt Lake City officials have admitted that 2034 would be their preference, while a lack of provincial government support dealt what would appear a fatal blow to Vancouver's hopes. It was also revealed that a potential double award for the 2030 and 2034 games had been discussed by the IOC Executive Board to create stability for winter sport, although no decision on this has been made. The prospect of a double award has previously been downplayed by IOC President Thomas Bach. Dabi stressed that this was a preliminary discussion. The future host commission for the Olympic Winter Games presented its report to the Executive Board, and Chair Octavian Moraro said the delay to the awarding of the 2030 edition demonstrated an advantage of the IOC's new approach to allocating its events. Here's the weather forecast of all its major cities. Well, that's all for today and thank you for staying with us. We'll see you tomorrow with more news and updates. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.